Hi guys, today we're going to talk about uncontested proceedings in a divorce. So there are two types, uncontested with an agreement, without an agreement, and also with one party responding to a divorce and not responding to a divorce, which is a pure default. And that's what I'm going to focus on today, more or less. So for me as a lawyer, when I have a party who is telling me that the other side is not to be found, or even they're there but they're not cooperating, or they're cooperating but they don't want to spend much money, as a lawyer I have to be careful, because when both parties are underrepresented or just one represented, it creates vulnerability for potentially setting aside the whole judgment because of fraud, misrepresentation, and overreaching, duress. Basically, if the other side doesn't understand how the process works and they don't have a lawyer, they're more likely to come back and set things aside. So as a lawyer, I tell the other side to hire a new lawyer, and if both parties say, can you represent us? I am not able to represent both of them because they have, ethically I'm not allowed to do that, because they have inherent conflict of interest, meaning their rights are so their interests are so different because they're going through divorce and they need their own independent counsel. In rare cases, there is an exception in ethical rules, and in rare cases some lawyers would allow the other side to waive the conflict of interest after describing all their rights and obligations and telling them that they can contact another independent lawyer. But I personally don't feel comfortable doing that, especially in divorce process. Not even in prenup. I mean, typically I don't do that. That's all, period. So, the mandatory step number one in the divorce, that it's called preliminary declaration of disclosure. So the rules say that both parties have to exchange preliminary declaration of disclosures. Those are two forms, FL 150, income and expense declaration, and FL 142, assets and debt declaration. Now, this is possible for the petitioner, the party who is filing for divorce, but what about respondent? In the case where respondent is not responding, it's not required because respondent is not there, or respondent is refusing to respond. So let's talk about default. Default means when the other side who is supposed to respond, respondent, is not responding. At what point do they need to respond? So we have petition, summons being personally served to respondent. And we filed proof of service, we have professional process server, so we have all these credibility factors saying that this person has been served. We have a video if needed, so that's done. The paperwork that respondent receives, summons, which is a form FL 110 on page 1 or 2, there are only 2 pages, says that you have 30 days to respond to prevent any further actions, which would mean default. So 30 days from the service of summons, right? But we typically serve summons and petition. So now, if the other side hasn't filed a response, can we still file for default? Not always. There are 3 types of cases when we're not allowed to file a default. The other side made an appearance. The other side filed a motion to quash service. And if that motion has been denied, the other side filed a writ of petition, of mandate, after denial of motion to quash. So how can other side made an appearance? By filing a response, by filing a motion to strike, by filing a notice of motion to change venue. Let's say they say this court shouldn't have jurisdiction over me and this shouldn't be happening here in this county but in that county, and notice of appearance, meaning I'm notifying the court that I will appear. And then we talked about quash service, meaning the service was improper or there is any defect with the service. And then if the court denies, file an sort of appeal. It's called writ of mandate. Okay, so let's say you waited 30 days and the other side didn't respond, didn't do all the things that I just mentioned. And then you prepare the paperwork for default. It took you a couple of weeks to do. And by the time you filed your default, the other side responded. Can you still file for response even though they filed after 30 days? Unfortunately, no. So if you know that the other side is not going to respond, or they're going to respond don't wait. So either file on day 31 everything, or give the other side an extension, which is the 99% what we usually do. We give the other side 3 months extension to get their response, to get their preliminary declaration of disclosures. Now, what is the scope of a default? The scope, and I always tell that it cannot exceed what was asked in the petition. So, for example, if I never asked for spousal support and child support and property division, I cannot now come back and say I want all of this. Why? Because when we serve petition and summons, we give respondent a notice. And the Court of Appeal said by not giving another side notice, we cannot, by not checking child support, spousal support, and then later requesting it, we're not giving notice to the other side. There are two contradicting Courts of Appeal saying if we didn't give a notice, one case says we still can ask the court to reserve on spousal support and child support. As you know, child support we can always ask later because everything changes with a child, but with spousal support, some Court of Appeal said you cannot reserve on spousal support if you didn't check off on the box in the petition that spousal support should be payable to you. So that's important to make sure that the petition is mirroring the default. So FL 100, which is the petition, needs to have an attachment with listing all assets and debts. The Court of Appeal said it doesn't require on FL 100, which is Andersen case, Andresen, case of appeal in California from 1994, said we don't need proposals in the petition, proposals of and values and division to be completed. So we can list all of that. We don't need to propose it. That's very important because sometimes when we file things, we don't know how it's going to be done. As long as we list it, and that's good because sometimes we file default 5 months from now and the values might change, right? So now imagine everything is done correctly. Now what forms do we file? How many forms does default require? And I think this video is going to take an hour if I go over every single form. So what I decided to do, so the form FL 182, just Google that form, and you will see on that form there is number 1, it says default with no agreement, meaning no response has been filed and no written agreement. There is a list of forms that are required, and it shows FL 115, proof of service, FL 165, notice of default. So I'm not going to go over these forms because they're all listed there. Unless you ask me and you ask me down in the comment section below, I can go over these forms. But they're pretty self-explanatory. So when you file a default, print out this judgment checklist and check off all the forms that you're attaching. Make sure you have copies of each forms as this judgment checklist requires, and FL 180 requires 5 copies. And so once you've done that, file with the court, and then depending on your county, you wait 3 to 6 to 9 months for the clerk to get back to you about the forms. I have to say clerks are very, very meticulous about everything being checked off correctly. So when you filled out these forms, don't just go to court and file, because you will face so many rejections that it's not funny. For example, you will receive one rejection that says, oh, you didn't check off this box. Then you check off this box and you print everything out, and then you bring it back to court, and then they say, oh, but you didn't fill out this address. They don't write everything. So when they notice an error, they send back without noticing our errors. They don't go, oh okay, let me tell you what 20 errors there are, and then you fix them and I'll submit it. They notice one, done, out, right? So the best way I would do, if you don't have a lawyer, either hire a lawyer to review your package for 1 hour or 2 hours, pardon me, or YouTube every single form and see that if someone has a video about how to fill out. I have some videos about how to fill out some of these forms, not all of them, and make sure they're filled out correctly. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. I will see you soon. Bye.